Greetings, the Hijabi Gamer here, and this video is undoubtedly going to piss some people off, especially if it gets the views. If it doesn't, probably not so much, but I have to make it. I mean, since when has pissing people off really stopped me from anything? So, representation. This is a video about representation, because when it comes down to it, this is the heart of all the issues with everything in entertainment. In Hollywood, in movies, in video games, it's always people whining about representation. You know, we need more, the black dwarves or the, female girl power in Halo or all of it. It's all about representation and people screaming about how there's not enough of it. And honestly, the last 3 times I tried to make this video, it ended up turning into an enraged rant because I am so sick of representation and how we need more of it and how there's not enough of, I don't know who. Black representation, LGBTQ representation, Asian representation. And I'm sitting there listening to this nonsense and just really fed up with it because seriously, just have you looked at me? Just pause a moment. Hell, pause the video and look at me. Okay, I'm an Arab American Muslim woman. I feel like I'm sitting in an emergency room and there's one person with a splinter screaming their head off and someone two seats down with a bullet in their arm, pouring blood, saying nothing. Because my God, seriously, you're telling me there's not enough representation. And especially when the people tell me I don't understand, when they tell me that I don't understand lack of representation. Well, let me tell you something. When I was a child, there were no Muslims on TV. Yeah, I mean maybe you know what? Let me amend that. Maybe on some obscure cable show that me and my brothers didn't watch because we didn't have cable. We just had the standard channels, but pretty much non-existent. I grew up with things like Ghostbusters, Transformers, G.I. Joe. Our favorite show by far was the A-Team. We loved the A-Team. And you know what? My hero when I was growing up was H.M. Murdoch. So much so that at one point I wanted to join the Air Force. I even wrote a letter to the Air Force Academy because I wanted to be just like H.M. Murdoch. Even today, I still wish I could afford piloting lessons because that's how much H.M. Murdoch was an influence on me. And get this, H.M. Murdoch was a white, straight guy. Not a Muslim, not Arab, and yet he was my childhood hero. But I can tell you, I grew up with zero Muslim representation on the screen. You know what instead? I had a father who taught us to be proud of who we are. Taught us about our history, about how, algebra is an Arabic word. Alcohol is Arabic, the Arabic numerals. He taught us about the great historical figures in Islam, like Sayyida Khadija. So we grew up to be proud of who we are. We didn't celebrate Christmas, but we had our own holidays to be proud of. We fasted Ramadan. So we grew up, even though we didn't see ourselves on screen, we didn't need to. And then get this. About 20 years ago, in September, an event I really shouldn't be, YouTube doesn't like me talking about, but you know what I mean. Muslims went from obscurity to all over the place. But not in the best way possible. On the contrary, every video game had Muslim bad guys and people screaming in Arabic. And which, by the way, just a side note, Arabs are only a minority of Muslims. Yeah, this surprises people. Most Muslims aren't Arab. It's something like, I think it was like 15%. It's definitely less than 20%. But, we were all over the news, all over TV as the go-to bad guy. So imagine what it must be like being dressed like me, listening to politicians talking about how, they need to get rid of the Muslims that throw us out and, hearing stories of Muslims being dragged off into prison with no explanation, just because Muslim. Or, my father told me how he once had a magazine with a certain person's picture on the cover. Not only was he so concerned, he cut his own name off it was a Time magazine. It wasn't like anything Arabic. It was Time magazine. And then he threw it in someone else's garbage because he was afraid that he would be associated with this unnamed person. But September, you get the idea. So we went from total obscurity to one of the most hated groups in the United States. And it reflected in the entertainment. And you think it was easy? No. But at the same time, my father reminded us that, these people are a minority of Muslims. By far, most Muslims are peaceful people, and we are nothing like them. And he reminded us that, we should still be proud of who we are. Like I said, I was going out dressed like this. Immediately after, on that same day, dressed like this. My father got very involved in interfaith. He still does interfaith. He's involved with the clergy in my town. So he taught us to be proud of who we are. We didn't need to see ourselves on screen. And I'm telling you, when I graduated from high school, I was the only girl in hijab in my entire class. You could flip through my yearbook. I was the only one. So when you hear these people screaming about representation and lack of it, well, first of all, it's like, yeah, I'm sure there's not enough. Just every single one of the people who are screaming about, there's plenty of representation. You're not going to see an overabundance of, and look, let me add this. This is not me demanding more Muslim representation. On the contrary, I don't like tokenized characters. I don't like characters who solely exist as a, we have a Muslim on the screen. Forced diversity. Because they're usually horrible characters whose entire personality consists of Muslim. Oh, well, what do they like to do? Muslim. Oh, they usually when they're on screen, they're praying, reciting Quran, reminding you what they can and can't eat. When you show a Muslim in entertainment, normally, usually it's like, oh, well, I can't eat pork. There's no just hanging. Most of the time, the fact that I'm a Muslim doesn't come up at work. Even when we get food, it's generally already known I don't eat pork, so I don't have to keep bringing it up. It's not an issue. Even when it did come up, it was like a tiny matter. It's like, yeah, I just can't eat pork. And I'm not the only one who can't eat pork, so not a big deal. So I don't want forced diversity. I don't want you to take an established character and change them into a Muslim either. Because I know that if you take someone who's an established, long-existing character and you change them, you're going to piss off the fans. You're not gaining any allies. That's the other thing I just find so insane about this. When you take a character who's long existed and, in a certain way, and you change them, do you really think you're getting allies? Because you're not. You're pissing off the fandom. You're pissing people off. So yeah, I'm not that dumb. If you were to tell me, hey, we're going to make Master Chief a Muslim, I'd be like, are you out of your mind? That's the last thing I want. So genuinely, I am tired of this whole representation argument, because I'm sitting there, I'm like, okay, are you so insecure and lacking in your own confidence that the only way you can feel any self-worth is to see yourself on screen? That's the thing. I mean, don't get me wrong. I remember the first time we saw the Muslim holidays in the calendar. It was a big deal for us. But we went from, being really hated. So that was huge. We went from total obscurity to hated to, oh, wow, Muslim holidays in the calendar. But it tells me you have no sense of what you need to be validated by seeing yourself on screen. And then there's this whole idea that you can't even enjoy or appreciate or relate to a character unless they are exactly like you. I mean, that whole thing, like I said, H.M. Murdoch was my favorite character when I was growing up. He was my hero. I'm not joking when I say that. When I was 12 years old, I wrote a letter to the Air Force Academy. And then when I saw the physical requirements, I was running around the block trying to get better at running because I wanted to join the Air Force, because I wanted to be just like H.M. Murdoch. Me and my brothers would run around the yard pretending to be the A-Team. Hell, I've just created my own Corpus Elite A-Team. That's how much I love the A-Team, and it had an influence on me. And they have nothing in common with me. Another character I've spoken a lot about is Viso-R, another straight white guy who happens to be Corpus and lives thousands of years in the future, and yet I can relate to his circumstances, and yet somehow he's not a Muslim. I feel bad for people then. If you genuinely feel like you cannot connect to a character because they don't look like you, it's more than just appearance. It's the human condition, the circumstances, the emotions. There's so much more to it than just, oh, they happen to be Muslim. I mean, even Ben Shapiro, I respect a lot, because as someone who is a religious person, and I see him on screen as someone who's also religious and holding to his faith, despite, it can't be easy for him either. He's Jewish. I'm Muslim. And finally, the other final thing that really just pisses me off about the whole thing is when you change things that don't make any sense at all. Where you're like, we're going to change a character just for the sake of changing a character. Like they said with the whole dwarves in the Lord of the Rings. Did anybody pause and say, that doesn't make sense? I mean, what, should I start demanding my Muslim corpus representation? Even though that makes absolutely no sense because they're involved in a cult that worships Prophet. But you know what? Muslim representation? I mean, I wouldn't want that either because it doesn't make sense. So when you force change on something, even when you don't care if it makes sense in the lore, when you have a message and you don't care if it makes sense, but you change it anyway. So this whole thing, it just entirely pisses me off. I'm genuinely tired of it. I mean, what next? Are you going to have Vulcan Muslims or something? I mean, then you give Spock a sister that just, again, doesn't fit. So I'm genuinely tired of this whole representation argument because it is invading everything. I mean, my own family were going through a pack of cards and they're looking at, and they're like, oh wow, these are so diverse. It's like, who cares? They're cards. They're playing cards. Who looks at playing cards and goes, they're so diverse? My God. But I guess this whole thing really pisses me off because people are whining, and don't tell me there's not enough of each one of these groups already as it is. But they're like, no, there's not enough representation. And you're telling an Arab American Muslim woman. And as I said, I want to emphasize the point. This isn't me demanding more representation. Far from it. I'm genuinely just tired of the forced diversity, the forced representation, the let's ignore lore, and then the people whining and screaming about girl power. I mean, what? Like, as if strong female characters never existed before. You know, and it's in everything. It is in everything. When it comes down to it, people make a million videos about every single new, latest entertainment thing. But when it comes down to it, the main key issue is everyone is screaming about representation and neglecting the lore, neglecting what makes sense just because they need to see themselves on screen. I'm really fed up with it. Anyway, I had to make this video because, as I said, you listen to, don't tell me there's not enough black representation. Don't tell the Muslim Arab American there's not enough LGBTQ representation. I mean, look, I get it at one point. Yeah, but it's been for the last 20 years. Every show you turn on. And yet, I am so tired of it. Anyway, that's my thought on the whole thing. Finally, making this video. Really frustrated. Let me know what you think. Hope to see you around in the tower. Thank you for watching.